Everyone, just type a Y if you can hear me. Awesome. So everyone can hear me fine. Can you all see the screen okay? If you're saying you can't see the screen. Okay. Screen, books, yep. Plenty. Okay, wow. Plenty of stuff here. Okay, so like I said, as you probably all know, it's been a very organic webinar how this has come about. And so welcome and thank you for being on here. And yep, so hopefully we're able to, I think Edward's host. Edward, are we live streaming this right now to the Lake Business Group as well? Just let me know. I know, but obviously prove it. Okay, so let's get on with this, shall we? Thank you for your patience. Like I said, I had a webinar before that came up, and it went quite a bit longer than I thought. So definitely interesting times, and people are nervous right now. So let's just start with a bit of honesty. So he here overall is pretty nervous with what's going on, and really is just like, yeah, if I don't stand up now, I've got some problems ahead of me. Yeah, most people are, and honestly, I don't blame you. I think it's a challenging time, and I think that, yeah, it's definitely the time you want to be well and truly on top of things, and well and truly, you know, yeah, not good to be fear focused, I would agree, but definitely time to step up and get things happening. So I'm pleased to see how many people are stepping up to learn this stuff. And you know, we got like 98 on here, and no doubt there'll probably be a few more listening to the replay, because I'll be inundated with people who want to go on the replay. So there's a lot to learn, and housekeeping, really good time just to get rid of distractions. Make sure you take notes. Recording will be available basically on our YouTube channel, probably within 24 hours. I always recommend people take handwritten notes. Now, type your questions by all means. Just understand, if I don't relate to the flow of the webinar, I won't be answering them on the spot. And there's a very good chance that they'll get lost in the many questions. So generally, you're better off to wait until they either relate to the flow of the webinar or to the end, where we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions and give you a chance to actually, and I'll be going through and just sharing things that we could maybe do to move forward, because obviously there needs to be, one webinar is not going to suddenly help you become empowered overnight. So for those of you who are looking for that, so are any of you here looking for that as well? Like, once we do this, actually would be interested in some kind of ongoing course or something where you can actually learn to do this for yourself and actually, you know, not be waiting for someone outside you to fix this problem. Okay, a few of you, great, yep. It's definitely something worth investing. And I spent, even when I was a lawyer, I put a huge amount of money in learning this stuff. I enrolled in every common law course I could lay my hands on, every legal rights, and I was a trained lawyer. And I sat with guys for 2 weeks in the underground movements and everything, and learned everything that I could. So yeah, it's the best skill you could ever learn, to be empowered, and not just that, teach your kids. I mean, my sons are so empowered if you meet them, and it's just great for me. That's probably the best part about it, is seeing how empowered my kids are, you know, really empowered, because I taught them that from young, when they didn't have the kind of fears that we've got. So this is my disclaimer. And look, I do need to say this, because I do get people still regularly messaging me, asking me, you know, why I need you to call me now or do this. And you're generally not going to get a response from that, because number one, I'm not a lawyer, and it's not what I do for my work now. I don't do that, and I'm not allowed to give legal advice, and I don't want to. I'm really about empowering people and getting you away from that system and learning how to actually, yeah, be empowered, and teach your kids to be empowered, because you're an example for your kids. You know, if you're a wuss or a bit of a dick, you know, your kids will be a wuss or a bit of a dick. You know, if you're walking around afraid, or carrying like a lunatic, your kids will walk around and carrying like a lunatic. So, Christine, are you live streaming it to your weight group? Well, hopefully so. I've just got to make sure. I've asked Edward if it's actually being live streamed. So, okay, yes, he is. He's saying, so he sent it through. Okay, it may not have been approved yet. I don't know. So don't feel sufficiently empowered to deal with a situation, then yeah, seek professional advice. So that's how I tell people. If you don't have the power and you're like, nah, I need to see someone, then yeah, we're more about doing that, you know, and educating you and running stuff to really teach you. That's how I learned myself. There's nothing like just doing it. So a bit about me for those who haven't seen it. Out of interest, who here is here that hasn't seen me present before? I'm just curious. I think most of you would have been here the other night. I just want to see if there's any who hasn't actually seen me before and you got roped into this and told about me. Okay, a few. So yeah, so basically that's my kind of dossier, whatever you want to call it. Got all kinds of system qualifications, you know, served the beast well and truly as an accountant, lawyer, financial planner, even worked for the tax office to kind of finish it off. And fortunately now I've, you know, left the dark side and basically got born again and come over to the light and doing this kind of work now. So, and actually helping and making a difference. So offshore and Australian planning. So I do a lot to do with finances, and some of you may have come to our Great Reset where we have a lot to do with the coming financial reset, protecting your wealth and growing it at this time, because that's extremely important stuff. But yes, I've had a lot of experience. So just a bit of background to help you understand and why I know all this kind of stuff and how it was that at one stage I was a lawyer who was well and truly, you know, in the system and playing along with the game, and what then became out of it. I really awoke, as most people do, to a pretty ugly, you know, crisis, so to speak, you know. So that's what got me out of it. So I just had a horrible crisis. So the shit hit the fan. Health apart. I had chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, depression, mental breakdown. Went to doctors, did everything like that. Didn't really help. By the hit a point where 1999, I was just like, I just can't function anymore. I just want to leave this planet or something, or else get away through this. And that got me on an alternate health journey. I ended up getting psychotherapy thanks to my dad's great advice, who did actually say to me, he said, whatever you do, don't take drugs, don't listen to, you know, doctors trying to put shit into you. He said, just go and see a psychotherapist, talk it out with someone. And my guess is your health issues are as much psychological as they are physical. And that was the best advice I could ever get. I followed that. Ended up in an underground movement because I couldn't really work that much because of my pain. And that got me really learning this stuff. And I wasn't doing law at all. I actually sat with people who'd been trained assassins and who'd come out of it and who were secret agents and who showed me deleted history books. And by the time 2003-4 came around, I was well and truly miserable. Knowing all this stuff. In fact, about 2005, I was a mess. I knew all this stuff and virtually no one else knew it. And that wasn't particularly fun. And so underground movement, Amy, just means it's just a group that you don't find it. If you go online, you'll never find it. It's just people who link indirectly, like who are evolved, very off the grid, very often very financially kind of ahead. They're out of the system. They've beaten the government in every single court case they've ever done, that the governments just kind of get rid of them quick, smart, and say, just if you keep your mouth shut, we'll leave you alone because you're kicking our ass. That kind of stuff. So I ended up also going, as I learnt this stuff, at some stage I went on a bit of crusade and I started to go on a bit of a freedom fighting journey. And I just started sport, taking on cops and going on and winning all kinds of cases all over Perth. Won a case in Queensland, had the time of my life. I noticed my good friend Cameron Roberts is on here, and Cam probably doesn't know this side of me, but basically I, was going around winning parking fines, getting out of them, getting out of speeding fines. You'll even see on the internet that if you search Warren Black Truthology, there's this lovely little article about me and how I actually took on the whole Queensland police and they were taking the piss out of me, and I won the case and the guy afterwards just said to me, I've never had anyone whip my ass so much in a court. And I pretty much tore their system apart and everything. And I thought I was pretty good. And then I started to find out that the system doesn't like it when you kick their ass for too long. And sure enough, I got a visit from one of the top cops, and it was quite a funny meeting. He was quite friendly. He came over. He looked a bit sheepish. I even said, "You want a drink?" He goes, "Yeah, that'd be great, thanks." And we sat down. He said, "Look, I'm very embarrassed to tell you, but my boss has basically said we don't like the fact that you're winning so many cases." And he looked like he felt really silly about it. And so yeah, we're going to kind of have me and others personally supervising any case that comes through you now, and just to make sure this kind of nonsense stops. That's what I've been told to tell you. And I just pissed myself laughing, and I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah." And after that, I lost every case I went up. So I just thought, yeah. At the same time, Legal Practice Board went after me on some, ludicrous, absurd technicality, a bit like some of you've heard of Serena Tafaha, and they were trying to dig everything on me. And after I did have a bit of fun with that particular one, I just did a bit of a story. I engaged a barrister to help me out, who was a bit of a dirty guy in terms of he was mean. I said, "Now let's just give him some shit." So we did. But after 3 years and making their life as miserable as they were making mine, and kind of forcing them to give all kinds of stuff they didn't want to give us, I got exhausted with the whole thing, and I just thought, you know what, there's better ways to live life. And I end up coming up with a very good arrangement with them. I just left the profession and thought, I don't want to do it anyway. I would prefer to be out the system. And that was the best thing I ever did anyway. And learning this stuff, legal rights and common law and the underground, was the best thing I ever did. I basically learnt the secrets. I got out of censuses, haven't done that for like donkey's years. Decided not to vote anymore. They tried to fire me and didn't get there. Kept my boys well and truly unjabbed from that. Homeschooled them. Even in the school system, I taught them to be empowered. Could keep you busy with funny stories and how they stopped bullying in their schools and various things like that. Told them basically when they asked me about, life and finances, I just said, look, the day you guys get a job, I said, the problem with jobs is it's like a drug addiction. Once you start and get the paycheck pouring in, it's very hard to break the addiction, So I just said, it's generally, I said, if you want to do a job, you're doing it more because it's giving you temporary time to run a business. And like, to give you an idea, my 19-year-old, by the time he was 14, had taught himself card tricks on YouTube. He'd been a horrible failure in school. People were trying to convince me he was Asperger's and all kinds of other shit. And I was just like, I just basically said, the one time I think someone sat down with me and tried to convince me at a party, your son's got Asperger's and I think you should get it looked at. I just said, I didn't pay you to give me fucking advice about my kid, you lowlife. And I don't think they quite expected that response from them. And I just said, get out of my face, not interested in your stupid comments. You don't know him, you've met him a couple of times or whatever, so don't give me that nonsense. And I think we need more of that if you're going to keep your kids' minds pretty clear. So that kind of shut her up pretty quickly. And the point was that I remembered that a 2-year-old boy who was very, very bright, and he failed in school, and I just assumed he didn't like it. 14, he was successful in the Fremantle markets. He was out there teaching himself to do card tricks on YouTube, had his own business going, got on stage tonight at the age of 16, was about a young entrepreneur. Now he basically is one of the main guys in our spiritual transformational group at 19. He's a very spiritual guy. He runs healing sessions and does webinars and training, and many say they prefer listening to him and me on the spiritual stuff because he's easier to understand. And I annoyingly admit, I think they're probably right. So, yeah, and then of course the other ones, one of my 17-year-olds, Edward's on here right now, live streaming it and he runs all the marketing, the back end of stuff. And James, the other one, makes his money by trading cryptos on the side. He gets in and out of cryptos and, makes money pretty quickly. So basically, the reason I'm sharing all this story is not to brag. I'm sharing it to show that I've lived this. And it's about a mindset, and it's about a way of thinking as much as anything else. Because believe you me, it sounds a wonderful story, but I mean, if you're thinking, was it challenging to do it? The answer was insanely challenging. I mean, we could not get our kids into childcare when we tried at one stage because they weren't, jabbed. We had all kinds of challenges we had to face with the school when they were in the school. We, I had constant pressure from family members against me about, like the unconventional style, and like, you've got to get them into university, and they've got to get a trade, and they've got to get a good job, and they've got to get finance, and sometimes I think you're being a bit irresponsible and not doing things properly. I got all that nonsense, probably the stuff that many of you are nodding your head going like, yeah, I can relate to you, Warren. I mean, if you can, just type out, yeah, yeah, baby, if you can relate to that. So I was just, the biggest people who give you the crap is the family. And unfortunately for me, there was a time in my life when I did care what people think, I did. And I took it seriously. And I used to get really upset when my family or my close loved ones took things seriously. I got really upset if my, partner or, whatever else I was doing. So yeah, look, this is one of the biggest things. So the biggest thing that it comes when you're going to go this path is you're dealing with so much pressures around you. Like the mass consciousness is like, unfortunately, as we've seen in recent elections, basically whoever's the biggest group of idiots basically decides who runs the country. And that seems to unfortunately be the whole thing. Someone says, mine tried to get me into a mental asylum. Yeah, look, I've got a friend in the UK who's awakened, and her ex-husband's just about going off his nut at her for, said he wants to get, daughter, jabbed, and wants her to wear a mask at 9 so she won't get COVID, and just all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, you've got the idiot factor to deal with. So it's like living in the matrix or a foreign country, and the challenge of enforcing your legal rights is learning to apply what you know to be true in a world where most other people think you're stupid for doing it. That's the biggest thing. And I personally think that's the most underestimated challenge that I've noticed with almost every single person, but almost every single person has to deal with. That's my observation. It's just not estimating enough how much that everything is about strategy. And you can be very, very ordinary at this kind of stuff and have very little knowledge and have great success if you understand the strategy and how it works. And that's what I learned as a lawyer first and foremost, was strategy. And I notice a lot of people go running around like, I'm enforcing my rights and I'm not going to wear a mask in the streets and you're not going to jab me. And deep down, they're carrying on like that because they're scared shitless and they don't really know what they're doing. And there's a scripture in the ancient Bible book which talks about this. It's a lack of knowledge that gets people into trouble. And because you've forgotten the law, I will forget your children. That's Hosea chapter 4, verses 6 to 7. And it says that because we don't know our rights, and if we don't know them, but on top of that, if we don't actually wise in enforcing them and knowing how to enforce them in a wise, strategic way, we're going to lose the battle. It's that simple. And I used to beat people as a lawyer, not because I was smarter than them, but or a better lawyer than them, but because I was more strategic and I was more clever than them. The reason I won that Queensland court case was, the prosecutor knew way more than I did, like he did. That's why he was smirking at me before the case and kind of finding the whole thing a bit amusing. He wasn't smiling within 15 minutes, but I went in behaving like a dummy, but I worked out what was important. So all the other stuff he was arguing, I didn't have a clue. I had no idea what he was going on about, but it didn't really bother me about that. I was focusing on what was important. I just had 3 things I cared about, and I won on all 3 of those points. I nailed his ass, and that was it. So you've just got to know the strategy. I got very good marks in finances, or in university, often with not doing a lot of study because I worked out what was important. So why am I sharing all this? Because it's most important to know what's to actually work out what's important. People are quick to give up their hard-earned rights, as unfortunately we're finding out. That doesn't make it easy. I was talking to a health practitioner today who I would regard as moderately conscious, and she was kind of going on about to me, like, how the sooner we can get people jabbed, and, the better, and was, very adamant about it. And if they don't get jabbed, you know, it just makes it really hard, because it means businesses like mine keep getting shut down. And this is what we're dealing with. You know, people are quick to give up their rights, and especially when their life, safety and security are threatened financially, things like that. Some of you have seen my Dr. Bill post, and I do that deliberately, educate people and awaken them in a kind of shocking way, of telling the truth in a shocking way. Like I think my last post I wrote about, you know, from Dr. Bill, being Dr. Bill Gates, I'm saying, you know, I understand how hard life is for you right now, you know, important life experiences like going and banging a Vegas stripper and drinking a Guinness, you know, beer in Ireland, and basically, you know, going to Macca's and, you know, whatever else, that sort of stuff. It's real suffering when you can't do that kind of stuff. And it was my way of really taking the piss out of people, because this is unfortunately what we're dealing with. And the stress, and we become lazy from prosperity in the West, and mentally we've got a whole lot weaker, you know, like miles weaker. So because of that. And this is one of the things that Buddha, I don't know if many of you know much about, very spiritual here, but if you actually study not just Christianity, but Buddhism, for example, Buddha said that its suffering exists because people are attached to stuff. As soon as you're not attached to things anymore, suffering is no more. And there's so much truth in that. Like that one lesson, I remember when I was very young, I read about all this, and I thought, nah, I made it my goal to not be attached to anything. It was easier said than done. And I would say these days I made a pretty reasonable fist of it. I've obviously still got lessons to learn because I'm still here, but by and large, I've made a reasonably good fist of it. And the secret, the number one secret to enforcing your legal rights is you've got to have a sense of non-attachment. And I always used to say the person who wins a legal fight is the person who's the least emotional and is the most non-attached. And that's why I would often beat people, because I was not because I was better than them, but I was more non-attached and I didn't give a shit and things like that. That's why I rarely lose a debate on Facebook, you know. That's why when I go and absolutely, you know, give crap to people and all that kind of stuff on Facebook, I don't care. When they troll me, I just laugh and agree with them, and they can't really do much about it because I'm not really attached. I don't give a shit if they think I'm an idiot. I don't care what. So someone says, are you not attached to your wealth protection? Well, no, I'm actually not. It's like, because at some stage I will lose my wealth. Now, whether I lose it in the next year because the government takes it from me, or whether I lose it because I die in a car crash, or because I miraculously ascend off this planet, I don't know. But at some stage, I'm not going to have this anymore. And so it's just a question of when. And I'm ideally, I'd like it to be my own choice, and as to when it happens. And that's why I do wealth protection. But if it happens, it happens. It's like, that's how I see it. And those who know me know I do have an incredible ability to adapt very quickly. And non-attachment is a secret, especially if you're going to focus on legal rights. If you're attached to the outcome, you will lose. You know, the truth is you may lose your early battles while you're learning. It's like when you first learn martial arts. You're going to lose some battles. While you're first learning anything, you're going to lose some things. So you may well lose some battles. I've lost plenty. You're hearing about my success, but I've lost plenty. I was wiped out in business from being an idiot 12 years ago, you know. I didn't just fail once, I failed 3 times. So I wasn't particularly bright. You know, I failed 3 times before I finally got over my stubbornness and learnt my lesson, you know, and worked out what I was doing wrong. I've lost various cases. You know, I got my ass kicked in a few court cases. I had a couple of embarrassing losses where it was obvious halfway through I'd fucked it up royally, you know. I went into Supreme Court and arguing, which I'd never done before, and I'm absolutely crapping myself and had no idea how I'd go. And I gave the worst argument ever, and but they let it through. I won a speeding fine case in Williams, when literally in WA, when I was so bad at it, I was just sitting there thinking, I was cringing at myself, and the magistrate was grinning at me, and she clearly didn't like the cops and what they'd done with our particular case. So she actually was telling me how to argue my case, and the cop was furious. You could see that he's glaring at the magistrate like, what are you doing? And she said to me, shouldn't you be saying Mr. Black this? And she had this grin on her face. I said, oh, that's what I meant to say, yeah. So she coached me through, and I won the case. You know, so I've had some really amazing experiences. And she said, yeah, my first case. I've had other cases where I turned up at the case, I had a winner argument, but the magistrate took one look at me, was giving me shit within the first 5 minutes and getting me really worked up, and then just held against me and ended the case. I flew to New South Wales to take on their system and never did it again. I walked in there with a perfect argument. The magistrate looked at me and said, "What?" That was literally how it started. And I started to read my argument and he said, "Are you finished?" I said, "Yep." He goes, "Case dismissed, order against you." And he gave me some huge fine. And I was like, okay. So sometimes you're going to lose. And the point is you get better and you learn what to fight and when not to fight. So I'm giving you a bit of a story here because you're going to have to learn to be smart. You're going to have to learn to be strategic, and you're going to have to, you know, Sashi says, "I ruffle the magistrate's feathers." Yeah, you know, and just learning how to do it. I've become a very good Facebook troll because I've literally learned to how to really shit people off, but in a way where they just can't get it back on me. Like, I will agree with, like, my favorite is just agreeing with what they're saying and making light of what they're saying to me, and then saying, "Yeah, no, I think you're right, 100% agree with you." In fact, when someone was trying to troll me on the mask, I said, "No, I agree with you. So I think we should wall muzzle up myself." And I said, personally, I think we should get a quarantine center set up, get the Chinese Communist Party, put them around the wall and shoot anyone that basically tries to leave. I said, that'll stop this silly little flu. And what can you say to that? I'm obviously being a complete and utter horrible individual, and it just shuts up all the trolls. You know, and I've actually even got friends now who actually contact me when they're having a hard time on Facebook or social media getting trolled and saying, "Can you help me out?" And I come into the troll buster. I said, "You give me 5 minutes of them and I'll stop and I'll silence these guys." And I always do. So, you know, you can learn strategy and you can learn wisdom. So it's everything. And I cannot emphasize this enough. And either you're going to think this was the greatest webinar you ever heard after today, or you're going to get off and think that this guy's an absolute idiot, you know, and a complete clown. And I was hoping he'd give me like all the best sections in the whole world, and I'd walk in there with 50,000 sections. No, that's bullshit. It's not going to work, you know. It's knowing what to hit. It's like getting an MBA. It does not make you good in business. In fact, you'll probably be hopeless, as Cameron Roberts will say. Cam's our marketing genius who does amazing stuff with us, and Cam would agree. You know, Cam would probably eat up any, you know, MBA person in business just because he knows what to target and what not to, and he shows me what to do. So it's everything. So this is sovereignty, okay? This is sovereignty. You are the captain of your own ship. And now this is the most important thing I will ever teach you and you'll ever learn from anyone. Now, the chances that you'll get this tonight, not in your, all get it in your head, but getting it in your heart is going to be the challenge. If you can get this one little thing I'll show you today, the day you'll get this, you won't have any more problems again with anyone. Like literally you won't. So I'm about to reveal this matrix. So the order of creation, God creates man and woman, who creates government, who creates persons. So that's the order of creation in a simplified model. So God creates man and woman, and really absorb that. And not just think about you're right, but actually own it, know that. Because that's ultimately, you could not know hardly any laws and could be an absolute numbnut, and you can win in courts. I mean, some of the best freedom people I've ever met, they don't hardly know the law. And the problem is they don't understand the language that's used to ensnare you and the trap. And yeah, man and women are persons, and that's, Christine, is why you are ensnared, because you don't understand that distinction, and most people don't. Now, lawyers understand this very well. There's a very big difference between a man and a woman and persons. Persons is in capital letters, as some of you would see, and it's an entity. You've got to go right back to Blackstone's martial law or Blackstone's legal commentaries, for example, to find out that martial law is always in capitalization, or Admiralty contract law. It's completely different to anything to do with living people. So persons are to do with corporate and things like that. So governments can create things, like I create companies for clients. I create persons, you know, and I get governments to approve it, and I'll create a company, or I'll create a foundation, or create whatever else. But the point is, a man, woman, sovereign to God knows who they really are, and they know their higher law. So you've got to understand the higher law when you're going to go in. When I learnt this one thing in the underground movement, it just changed my life. I started getting results. And whenever I moved away from this, I started losing. So in The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he gives a few little gems. Plan for what is difficult while it's easy. Do what is great while it is small. So that's your first little thing. So right now, while it's still doable, plan for it. I planned before I went out doing what I'm doing, even with masks, I planned everything. I meticulously walked through in my mind every scenario that I could possibly imagine how I would handle it and what would happen. And that's why I really have not had a single issue, because I was planned, I'm calm, I'm confident. I just assume that the rules don't apply to me. So people say, are you special and they don't apply to you? I'm like, yeah, no, I am. I'm very special. I'm sure Bill Gates thinks he's special, and I'm sure George Soros does. And that's kind of why they, in all their, dark stuff that they're doing, they're actually very successful because in their finances and stuff, because they just assume they're special. So do I assume I'm special? Yeah. Does that make me narcissist? Probably. Does it bother me? Not really. I know that quite a few people think I'm a narcissist, and that's cool. So plan for what is difficult while it's easy. Do what is great while it's small. Because the prime art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. I never really fight cops these days, and I generally win because I don't fight them. I don't see them as the enemy. I just see them as normal people and probably got more challenges than me because they've probably got mortgages, they've probably got family, they've probably got things going on. My thing I first do is see them as people who are just trying to do their job. And I talk to them normally, like I talk to any of you right now. And as a result, they're always very friendly with me, and they end up seeing me as their ally, and they start telling me about these horrible conspiracy theorists and how they annoy them. And I just laugh and go, yeah, okay. And it's quite funny. So the point is, I just don't get caught up in the drama. And like I said, that's what Buddha taught. That's what Christ did. That's what in the Bhagavad Gita of the Hindu. You just don't get caught up in the drama. You just stay very, very unattached and to the whole thing. So thinking, as I mentioned, strategy. Sometimes we need to lose the small battles to win the war. And I reckon that could be the best advice that West Australia, especially, I'd be giving West Australia or Queensland right now. Sometimes you're going to have to lose some small battles. And so be it, It's like if you play baseball, or if you watch Major League Baseball, which is one of my little, illusory kind of, dead brain hobbies, they play 162 games in a year. Now, generally, the greatest team that ever played baseball lost 46 games in a year. That was the greatest team that ever played. And I can remember even like last year, for example, the year before, one of the top teams that won 100 games and 102 and lost 60. And then in the finals, they lost games again. In other words, they know they're going to lose. But at the end of the day, what's important is they win when it counts and they win enough games to stay afloat. So the number one rule of baseball is you've got to win enough games to stay afloat. If you don't win enough, you won't make the playoffs. But once you make the playoffs, all bets are off. As happened 2 years ago when the Washington Nationals won the baseball championships because they barely scraped in. I think they won about 90 and lost 72. They just won enough in each playoff series, and then when it really counted, they won. And so that's all we're interested in, is winning the war. In other words, getting our freedom, getting our sovereignty, and getting a damn good country to live in. And that's going to take some process. It's going to take some waking up, and it's going to take conceding some battles that just aren't important. So appearing weak when you're strong and strong when you're weak. That's my last one I've got there. And I mean, the reality is we're going to be facing challenges like these are the obvious, like this silly little tracing shit that's going on right now. Trying like crazy to get people to run around taking this, needles for this nasty flu virus, which is killing the world supposedly, or 0.1% of it or whatever. You'll hear this in the near future, no doubt, like talking about how chipping people and bringing in that, and anyone who's connected to the grid and the order and the system, no doubt will find it's easy to say right now, I'd never take that chip, but if you've woken up because you weren't prepared and you're running around as a bit of a dummy and not understanding how what's really going on, and then wake up one day and you haven't prepared your financial future, you haven't learnt your rights, you may well be in a very difficult situation deciding, do I virtually have to kind of starve or live in severe hardship for a while, or just take the chip? And I mean, I'm meeting people who are doing that with this jab. You know, and if you'd said to these people 3 years ago that one day a government will turn up and kind of say you got to have this jab, and they'd probably say, nah, no government would ever kind of coerce me into that. And well, I'm meeting very evolved people who are now breaking, and they're doing it for their job or their income. So it's really actually, it's a great threat to the health, great threat to your freedoms. We're even talking about this cyber pandemics, if you haven't heard of that little doozy, where there'll be a blackout. And I think that to cap it all off, after this current rise in economics, you're going to see an economic meltdown as well in the next couple of years, leading to this reset. So you don't have a lot of time, but you've still got time. And that's what I want to emphasize today. And a lot of you are very scared. And the best thing you can do with being scared is channel that energy into something positive. When people say to me, now I'm not scared at all, I'm like, well, either you're lying or you really have mastered Buddha's secrets. Or you've learned to channel that fear into really good action. And that's what it comes down to. So I just had to start with a lot of that on psychology and really mastering this. Those who were here on the webinar the other night, which I deleted that recording deliberately because I ended up saying some stuff I thought later on I didn't really want out there. So for those of you who couldn't find that, the first one I did last Monday I've kept, but the one on Wednesday that I did was I went into some deep stuff, which I thought later on now I'd rather keep this to sort of a private meeting. So that's it, the law. This is a very good book. If you really want to learn about mindset around sovereignty, and one of the first books in the underground movement and the off-the-grid people that got me reading was to read this book. And John says he read that book. Yeah. This is a free book online. I would strongly recommend any of you who value your freedom, have a look at this book. It's a really good book to get your head in the right place in this. When plunder becomes a way of life, men create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. So we're literally living that right now, you know. Basically a way, you know, to take you up the ass and make it legal. That's how I describe what's going on right now. So, you know, try to imagine a regulatory labor, but is not a violation of liberty. A transfer of wealth imposed by force that is not a violation of property. So that's just an example there by Bastiat. Government is a great fiction through which everyone endeavours to live at the expense of everybody else. And that's what we're seeing again. Life, liberty, but this is an important one to understand with mindset around this. Life, liberty, and property don't exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was a fact that life, liberty, and property existed before that caused men to make laws in the first place. Now ponder that one. And this goes back to order of creation I showed you. The reason that laws are made in pure common law is to protect life, liberty, and property. So for example, if I could just go and kill you or steal or walk in and take your TV set, or walk into your house one night because I feel like it and just grab your telly and walk out, that actually violates your property. And so laws have to exist to stop me or anyone doing that to you. That's what laws actually are meant to do. Laws are meant to protect people's life, liberty, and property. So, and laws that are meant to do that should be strictly enforced. So, by contrast, laws that do not do that are not that at all. They're actually something different. They're a form of legalized plunder. And you're dealing with a mafia cartel extortion racket. And the problem is, if your city's been taken over by the mafia, just running around, you know, egging the mafia on isn't always going to be successful, because if the mafia just say, okay, thanks, and shoot you in the head, it's kind of a problem. So if the mafia take on the city, to get them out and deal with it, you'd have to be pretty smart, and I'm sure you would agree. And that's kind of what's happened here. So, but first and foremost, realize that the reason that you have these common law rights is not because the government has said, oh, we've got some good news for you. You know, you got a license to get married. Or guess what? There's a human rights bill which gives you freedoms. No, that's all bullshit. I mean, that helps, but that's not the reason that you have human rights. You have human rights because you were created as a child of God, first and foremost. And you're made in the image of God. It says that in Buddhism, it says it in Bhagavad Gita, it says it in Christianity. And because of that, because you are a sovereign being. And if you're not one, it's only because you've chosen to give that up for what's called a compensatory benefit, which could be living a comfortable life in the Western world where you can go to Vegas and bang the stripper if you want to do that, or go and do whatever else you want to do. But first and foremost, understand is that, for example, I can remember when I was in the underground common law movement, and I learnt this, and I learnt about marriage. I'm like, shit, because I was married under the state. I thought if I'm married under the state, that means that the state controls my marriage. And the guy said, bingo, now you're getting it. I was like, oh, shit. So, I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So at the time, Grace and I were like, do we divorce? What do we do? And as it turned out, we ended up divorcing. So now I'd never get married again in the law of the state. I would have a tantric marriage or tantric union or tantric connection or tantric commitment. I'm not a licensed accountant anymore or lawyer because I'm like, I don't need the government to tell me that I can, do certain things. I've chosen not to give you legal advice because I don't actually want to. I've chosen not to give you financial advice because I don't actually want to. That's actually the deeper truth. I don't actually want to. I don't want to be responsible if shit hits the fan, because the first person you'll go like, oh, you were the guy who gave me advice to invest in that. And even if I'd given you 27 disclaimers that saying, well, you shouldn't, and, you got to realize it's a risk. It's not what you remember. All you know is that right now you had 100,000, now you got 50,000. That's how we think. So I'd much rather empower you to have knowledge and have wisdom and learn to do it for yourself. And, only advise in the things I know I can give you very clear advice and with a lot of certainty. So it's just realizing this too, you don't need, yeah, no, she doesn't, Christine. She doesn't need the government to be a self-represented litigant. No, exactly. She doesn't need that at all, So I don't want to have a license for the law because, if I'm a licensed lawyer, I have to do what someone tells me to do. And if you actually read the Legal Practice Board and Law Institute legislation and rules around this stuff, it's pretty bad. Like, I can't even give advice around tax minimization because that's going against the interest of tax laws. That's what it says. So life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. So it's really important to get that your right for liberty, your right to move around, your right to do whatever you're doing, your right not to be muzzled up like a sheep, your right not to have some thing shoved up your ass or whatever else is your, is basically your right not to be violated in your liberty, your life, or your property, So the problem is when law and morality contradict each other, this is what happens. You've got the cruel alternative of losing your moral sense or losing respect of the law. So as an example, if someone asked me, are you a sovereign citizen, though? This is another one about language. I'd say, no, I'm a sovereign man. Because a citizen instinctively comes under a government corporation, like an Australian citizen or Panamanian citizen. So I don't personally like that word. I use the word, I'm a sovereign man. I'm not a sovereign citizen. So there are people who think that plunder loses morality once it becomes legal. I can't think of any more alarming situation. So just because the government says, like Joe Biden says, hey, dudes, guess what? I'm taking a new 30% wealth tax, like he's decided to do, and say you rich don't need it because we're better to handle it than you. Of course, the reality is that's a very alarming situation because basically what Mr. Biden's saying is that, it's legal now because I'm saying you can do it. No, it's stealing. It's still stealing. And this is what Bastiat says in the law. It's stealing. Like, I don't personally object to GST, for example, because GST to me, I've always seen it as a very fair, impost or contribution to the well-being of society and it rewards people in accordance with their wealth. If you're richer, you pay more. If you're poorer, you don't pay much at all. Income tax and I've always seen as complete and utter theft. So understand this as well, that just because a law says someone can do something doesn't mean that they actually can. But in saying that, you've got to work away strategically around the law and how do I function in the real world now that this is going on. Because it's one thing to say to the fox, hey, you can't come in and eat the chickens. And then the fox goes, oh, okay, well, I'll hold a legal tribunal. And then me and about 5 other foxes will decide whether or not, you know, that's right. I mean, obviously, he's going to say he's allowed to do it. So, as Jefferson says, there's no justification for taking away freedom in the guise of safety, and those who do it don't deserve liberty nor safety. So most people don't deserve it. Most people deserve to lose their rights. And the fact you're listening here is showing at least that you deserve to be given a chance to keep them because you're willing to do something about it. And I admire people who will do that. I really do. I mean, when I did it, I was scared shitless. I can tell you now. You know, I grew up in a household where I was my mum's bitch, basically. You know, I would just basically, my mum ruled the house and, you know, and so my boundaries were horrendous. And so it took me a whole lot of, you know, psychotherapy and stuff like that to actually learn just to say no and not, you know, give myself up. So for me, learning my rights was scary. I was bullied from 6 to 8 in school constantly. And had to go through all kinds of trauma clearing. So for me to actually heal myself of that was not that easy at all. So rest assured, it's very doable, everyone. I mean, if I could do it, then you can do it too. Because really, I was a absolute patsy. You know, I really was an easy touch. So the main thing is that when people become afraid, when the government get afraid of their people, you know, that's when you got true liberty. And of course, we've talked about this, and if you want to hear more, you go to the other webinar. And I've mentioned that this is a 3.5-hour free video on YouTube and well worth watching. So let's cover some important foundations that I learned in my quest in the common law and in my study. And you're talking to someone who studied everything I could find. I read deleted books. I read deleted law books that you couldn't get anymore. I went through the Constitution. I was fortunate enough that my father used to be one of Australia's top constitutional experts and political. So he taught me a lot and showed me how the system really worked. Fortunately, my dad knows many of the politicians really well too. So I've met a lot of them over the years and, you know, got to get a pretty good insight how the whole thing works. I studied every single possible thing I could find to learn and try and understand this horrendous legal system that we're in. And so these are some foundational stuff that many of you know. And like I said, if Wayne Blue and I went against each other, for example, those of you know, Wayne would probably know 20 times more than me, you know, and I'm sure that Serena and others probably know more than me too. But I know enough to make this work in the real world, you know. Kim, the YouTube video I mentioned was called The Money Masters. So, but yeah, so I know enough to do that. So, like I said, this is just a practical way of learning, and you can build on this. And like I said, there's really a lot more to this. And that's why for those, if there's enough people, I'd be very happy and keen to, you know, I've been talking to Grace and my team about doing some kind of course and even a workshop. Like Grace said to me, we should just do a actual singers from WA. Why don't we do a workshop down south and we actually get people to meet up? And I said, that's actually good because there's stuff I can share privately, but I wouldn't share on a recorded webinar. So I said, that'd be really fun. So I would still, you know, I'd live stream a lot of the course, but then at nighttime or whatever, we could sit down and I can share some doozies. So yeah, look, basically we're going to do that. Someone said, doesn't Wayne Blue constantly lose in court? Yeah, look, that's like I said, that's his path. I don't get involved in it, but that's why I've chosen to go a different path and stay away from that arena myself. But yeah, no, so look, we've got places we can go and, you know, possible things we could do. So yeah, I'm very excited about that actually. I like getting together face to face because there's things I can kind of yabble on about, which I can't yabble on about when I'm as much in a webinar. So understanding common law and Admiralty, which I shared previously, and there's just more to understand it because you've got to get this to understand that a lot of people run around saying, I have common law rights, you know. Someone basically says that, look, we do, But this is why this state of emergency stuff that's going on is a real problem, because whoever's designed this whole scam that's going on is clever as fuck. They really are, because they've invoked, you know, even though the basis is very dubious for invoking martial law, generally martial law in Blackstone's commentary was invoked in times of disasters like cyclones, pandemics, anything like that. In that situation, under common law would be suspended and it'd be superseded by the overall importance of the martial state law. And I remember learning this, and that's why Blackstone and what they always said in the underground movement is woe to a society when they bring in martial law in a time of peace. You know, that's just absolutely horrendous. So martial law, yeah, we're going to extend till 2022. Yeah, I had no doubts they'd do that, Sashi. But I can see this going on for quite a while myself, and until people really, really wake up. So it's going to take a massive pushback or a very radical change in the political arena, you know, where we've actually got a really powerful kind of political party or leader within one of the parties, like when with Trump with the Republicans, that can actually push back against it and isn't afraid of the deep state. You know, that's the kind of thing that you're going to need to see. And hopefully that's sooner than later. It may take a little bit longer than we would like it to take. So it's... Now, here's a very important thing, that all of you know that the City of London is different to London and England, and it's completely independent. Is there anyone who doesn't know that? Yeah, most people don't know that, but here we are. You can have a look at yourself. The City of London is the only part of Britain over which Parliament has no authority. The mayor of mandate stops at the boundaries of the square mile. So there's a legal corporate part of London which exists, but separate from the rest of it, where not even the Queen can do anything about it, the Parliament, no one. They can basically do what they blooming well want. Who has the authority? Well, surprise, surprise, the banks, the Rothschilds banks, the merchants, the guys in charge of the financial. It was a Rothschilds creation. It's a whole corporation. It's a very small part of London. And the whole world is ruled by it, if you want to know. All the IMF and they own the land, the International Monetary Fund, everything comes through that. So basically this little group of people control the whole world through this sovereign little jurisdiction in the middle of London, which is very nicely little hidden, and hence why many of you don't know about it. So the Vatican's the same too. So these guys are like the business side of the world scam, and the Vatican's like the religious side of the world scam. That's kind of how this little scam works. So, yeah, Washington a bit too. So you've got Washington's a whole different story. Howard Freeman explains how America was set up as a corporation after Lincoln, and that's why there's a federal United States compared to the true United States, and the federal one is a different one to the true United States, but that's a whole different thing. So the City of London, basically what happened was in 1290, and I had to find this out in the underground movement. There were guys who had the deleted history books, stuff that's actually been, you know, conveniently squeezed out. But what you won't read about in modern history books is in 1290, the Renaissance began with a major reformation that happened in England, where what happened was people got royally pissed off with the bankers, like royally fed up with it. So they fucked up London and England in the same way that they've done it everywhere else. The Catholic Church was running rampant, burning witches at that time. England was trying to stay out of all of that. And in 1290, by that time, England was in ruins. People were financially broke. They had mortgages, and people started to get fed up. And a new king came in, and the new king, King Edward, was a king who had no like for bankers, and was by and large a very religious man or spiritual man, and somebody who actually believed in human rights and sovereignty. And one of the early things he did was he rounded up all the bankers. He executed the worst of them, to the shock of the whole fraternity. He got some of the rest of them. He deported some others, and then the rest of them, he made them wear special hats by law, so everyone would know that they were a former banker and to be given lower status in society. And this actually happened. And He cancelled all the debts by law and freed everyone from the mortgages and gave England a debt-free start. He did a financial reset, so to speak, but he did it where he freed everyone from their debt and gave everyone a fresh start. Within about 10 years, England was booming. The Renaissance came in. And for a period of 376 years, England was free from the Rothschilds, free from the banks, free from everyone. And there's many stories of history that can, give you goosebumps. I could tell you in that period, like the Armada, like England had a lot of amazing stuff happen. But in 1666, after a major decline that had happened in rights and freedoms and had gone back down the toilet, a certain Rothschild, through a nice bit of scam like today, set London on fire, and London ended up and burning the whole place down. And then, with the ruined fraternity, offered to come in and give the funding to help the country get itself out of its mess. If that story sounds familiar. and then after that, England, a corporation was set up, and the Rothschild owned that, and they have ever since. So that's the basic history of how it all came about. Who's blown away by all that, by the way? Like, shit, I didn't know all that kind of stuff. Because that's a very important part to understand of what's happened in the world and why it's the way it is. Because these chaps are behind just about everything that's going on. Yeah, so some will know some, but yes. Yeah, so it's kind of good to understand the whole thing, because this is the whole, as a lawyer, for example, when you actually become a lawyer, if you read your contract, you are actually become under the City of London, like to the bar. So you've made an oath to the City of London, and if you go further into it, you've made an oath to Lucifer. It's pretty ugly. And I mean, when I found that out and I traced it all through, I was in horror. So I was very glad to get out of the legal system. And I think Serena will be very glad when she's out too. She'll probably end up being very grateful that she's been, booted out of it, because you really don't want to be in that system at all. So the common law rights, this is a song I learned in the movement, which works really well. A child who doesn't know their common law rights are vulnerable to addiction, coercion, divorce, and suicide. And that applies to adults too. Rest assured that your life will get pretty miserable if you don't really understand this kind of stuff. So I want to show you three important biblical principles. For the law of Moses, or the Old Testament law, is the foundation of all the English Westminster legal systems. And this is really important. And those of you who've gone to who heard Wayne Glue would know Wayne's very familiar with this guy, and I know quite a few of Wayne's friends and various others, and they're all very familiar with this and how the Bible, and many people who go into the common law movement who don't particularly like the church or the Bible end up loving the Bible within a short period of time, because they realize that most of it contains many of the greatest legal principles. It gives you the whole foundations of life to win your legal battles, and the whole legal system is based upon it. And of course, the book of Revelation, of course, gives you exacting blueprint of what's been planned. I've been a Bible lover since I was probably about 18. I remember when I heard it when I was young, but I remember when I started reading it a lot when I was 17, 18, I just liked the book. I thought, this is amazing. And then these days I've got even more heavily into the, the Hindu, basically the Bhagavad Gita and the Buddhist teachings as well. I've got, and then the Keys of Enoch and the sacred Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, said that before, the completion of this era and the moving into an ascension, a new sovereign way of earth, that there would be a war between the light of sun and darkness. In other words, it'd be a huge war as people would rise up and take the planet back. And so that's the time we're in now. We're in a war, and wars mean that can take time to win. So it's getting prepared to fight, getting prepared, ready to, be strong. So Exodus, the 10 Commandments, supports life, liberty, or property. So very important to understand the 10 Commandments if you're going to be doing any kind of work around the common law or around knowing your rights and getting back to these basics. That's why we do a lot of Bible studies ourselves and teachings, but not the kind of shit that, the churches teach people. But we've gone our own path. I've done my own study and done my own readings and my own evolutions of it. And the common law movement, as well as the Kriya Yoga movement with Sri Yukteswar Babaji. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Indian Kriya Yoga movement, but some great teachings on the esoteric meanings and the hidden meanings of this stuff. So the 10 Commandments give you some rules that when societies that have honoured them have done very well. One very interesting one I've always found, and I did a lot of study, and I know Wayne and I were talking about this, but you look at any society that have followed the 10 Commandments, by and large, they've prospered. And the reason why is most of them actually make damn good sense for life, liberty, and property. Like, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Now, I can remember in Perth, and some of you may remember, there was a time when Sundays you didn't really work. It was kind of like a day off. I love those times myself because it was nice to have a day when you could go driving and there wasn't any blooming cars, on the roads. It was a really quiet day. And places like Japan, when they brought in 7-day trading, within 10, 15 years, everyone's in major stress and really exhausted, and they're burning out because you do need a day off. And I always make sure I've got at least one day a week when I just do fuck all. And the Sabbath day wasn't some day you had to go to church and wear a robe or anything. It was actually a day of rest, a day of chilling, a day of being with the family, a day you just didn't work at all. That was what the Sabbath day originally was. So that's one very good example. I'm not trying to be religious here, but these are actually showing you some of the important commandments to win legal battles, which I follow strictly myself. Family Sundays. I always, Saturday or Sunday, I take a day to do just purely for myself. I don't work, I don't do much, I just absolutely chill out. I often fast a bit and just have really good time of reflection, I am the Lord your God, which brought you out, you shall have no gods before me. Now, and you shall not make any graven image. Now, what's very interesting with that is that when I studied the Hindu teachings and various others, most of them have one thing in common, is that in Hindu, for example, they teach about Brahma or the ineffable God, or the incomprehensible, one, or the Shakti Shiva, for those who've done the Vedic Tantra kind of thing. So in Buddha, there's like the ineffable Buddha, which means really that ineffable oneness of consciousness, but it's not limited by images, but is like one major advanced form of consciousness or energy and personality, which basically all living things come out of, like we're one big form. That's the best way to describe it. So that means that we all come out of that and we're all made in the image of God or the image of the ineffable God, which means that all of us are sovereign, powerful, light, dynamic beings. And governments are just artificial graven images of creation that come out of them. That's how I see them. That's why they really don't, by and large, bother me. And when you start, if you ever get that and learn that, you will learn what I mean. So, and like I said, this is not meant to be a big religious lesson here, and that's why I'm deliberately showing you that if you go and study all of the really major spiritual works of the world, we've got different ways of saying it, but by and large, there's certain key principles that come through all of them. And this is one big one, is this whole, when you understand that. And that's why I love reading the Kriya Yogas, because they really get that. Some of their teachings are mind-blowing when they teach about the ineffable creator or source or the higher Christ, which they say, which Sri Yukteswar would talk about. And there was a very powerful account of Sri Yukteswar about when he actually, they kept arresting him, and every time they arrested him, he just ended up sitting outside praying outside of his room, and they realized he'd actually learnt the secret of teleportation, and they gave up, very discouraged. So there's all kinds of things you can go into, and I don't want to get caught up. The main thing with the 10 Commandments is to realize that our legal system is actually based on these, actually are. So the Sabbath day, that's why Sunday trading came in. That's why this God's and graven images. That's why the Constitution talks about Almighty God. Like if you read the Constitution of Australia, if you read the Constitution of America, if you read the Bill of Rights, if you read the Magna Carta, you will always see Almighty God. And glory to his son, Jesus Christ, because they're actually taking directly from this much higher law. And as soon as you invoke that, you're invoking that power. And they don't like that, because that law gives you a lot of fucking rights. The Magna Carta and the Bible, unlike what the churches have taught you, and that give you a lot of fucking rights. It actually does, especially when you combine with the New Testament. The rights given in the Bible are phenomenal. The Bible's the reason I got myself tax-free legally, you know, because I realized I had an inalienable right not to have my income taken from me. And I learned that from the Bible. I didn't learn that from anyone else. I found it in the scriptures, and I'll show you that shortly. So even things like here, you shall not kill. Now, what it's saying here is when you read it carefully, you shall not kill unlawfully. So self-defense, when you actually read more carefully, the law of Moses clearly gives you the right of self-defense. Now, the modern law doesn't do that by and large. So you can see the whole perversion of the law that's going on right now. It's a perversion, it's an absolute disgrace. And that's one of the reasons I'm glad I'm not a lawyer, because there's no way I want to have an oath to a fucking legal system that gives glory to Lucifer, as it says in the, you know, if you read the bar's oaths in the actual legal practice board in England, and when you see the perversion of the law, where they take away the right to self-defense, and all that kind of stuff, you have a right to defend your property. That's life, liberty, property. You'll see that in the book of Deuteronomy. You shall not commit adultery. I mean, no one wants someone coming in and stealing their wife or husband and not talking to them about it. You know, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. The Freemasons bear false witness against people all the time. Some of you who might know are Freemasons, and I know I've got a former friend I used to hang out with who used to be a 32nd degree Mason, and I remember talking to him years ago, and because we were good friends, and I helped him out through a bad situation, he was very open with me. I said to him, mate, I said, I've heard all this stuff and studied all this stuff, the underground movement. This in 2009. I said to him, how true is this? Like, do they really control the court system with secret signs? He goes, yeah, fuck yeah. I said, really? He goes, yeah, of course. I said, do you guys have assassins? He goes, yep, we do. And so everything that you hear, I found that. Do you guys control the police force? Yeah, totally. And it was like, okay, this is interesting. So the Freemasons, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. That society goes against it. They do, yeah, ritualistic killings, all kinds of horrendous stuff. You've got to realize you're dealing with a perversion of the law that's just beyond almost anything you can comprehend. It's disgusting, you know, it's just an absolute disgrace. But in a, you know, I don't want to use the word Christian, but in a country that's built on a higher law, that we've allowed this absurdity to come into it, you know, it's just this disgrace. You know, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. I mean, who wants jealousy in a society? Jealousy is when people start killing, or when they start swindling in business, or where people start trying to steal from you or rip you off. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. So you can see here the 10 Commandments was originally given to give protection of life, liberty, property, and to give you a safe family, a safe relationship, and where things are done honorably, and if, you know, you and your partner were going to kind of go through difficulties or whatever, but you do things honorably and respectfully. So the whole 10 Commandments was meant to have a moral code that people would follow. So that's the first one. The second one, and this is the key for legal notices, is let by 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. It says in the book of Deuteronomy. So by 2 or 3 witnesses, let by everything be established. So in other words, that was brought in for protection. So I couldn't just get up and say, me too, you know, because I'm really hurt because, you know, as a woman, because some guy rejected me and then accused him of some diabolical offense. You had to have witnesses. You had to have a correct legal system. And it was designed for protection and designed for correct legal process. Now, I remember when I learnt the common law in the movement and even dealing with banks, this is absolutely dynamite for dealing with banks or with school bullying or dealing with problems in your schools. For those of you who got that, dealing with your bosses in the workplace. I've used this to deal with a friend, my mum's friend, who was getting stalked by a guy, like harassed by a guy she used to date, who was basically trying to chase her for money and go after her and saying she had to reimburse him for the cost of the dates. And I did it, and I used Matthew 18, 15, 17 on him, and I absolutely royally roasted his ass on a platter. It's a great one because what it teaches you is the exact correct higher law process for dealing with a dispute with someone, whether it's a bank, whether it's a business who owes you money, whether it's a friend who's promised you something and let you down. It covers everything, okay? So when you go through Matthew, it says here, this is it here. If your brother shall trespass against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him. Don't gossip to the neighbor. You know, don't go and kind of, you know, waffle away behind his back, anything like that. But basically go and tell him one-on-one. So this is the first thing I like to do. And this applies to everything. This applies if someone owes you money in business and they won't pay you. You first have a really nice talk with them. Show them their fault. Reveal it to them. Give them an opportunity to make it right. Yeah, it's in the Quran, yeah. And go to them from a spirit of reconciliation. I do that, by the way, with the ATO. I did this. I've done that with the police. I always go first and talk to the policeman as a fellow human being. That's how I talk to him. So that's the first thing you do. You don't go, oh, you can't do this to me or whatever else. You first just say, look, I don't want any misunderstanding here at all. I really get you doing your job. This is what I've done with it. I get you doing your job. You know, I really do. No problem with that. You know, and if they're trying to say, look, you got to do this and you have a legitimate exemption, and we'll use masks as quite a common one. You know, I do have an exemption. Now, the way I read the mandate, you know, the way I read the mandate of the mask, and I can show it to you if you like, just want to make sure I'm on the right track. It clearly doesn't say I have to provide proof of this. And in my understanding of, you know, the Commonwealth legislation of privacy, I don't have to tell you either. Now, if that's not correct, I'm happy to hear what you've got to say, because that's my understanding. So, you know, I don't mean to go, you know, to cause any problems here, but that's just my understanding of the situation. That's how I've always done things. I learnt this from Howard Freeman. Works very well, mind you, very well. Most of the time, as it says here, if he shall hear you, you've won your brother. So you've won him. In other words, you've actually got a friend. I remember the cop who pulled me over for speeding last time. By the end of it, we're chatting like old long lost friends, and how, you know, what a difficult time it was. He's saying, oh yeah, you know, like this has happened, my family's going through this. And I remember the tax office took me through an audit, and I had two guys turn up. By the end of it, I'm helping the guy with his neck problem, giving him advice on how to fix it. And he's very grateful to me, but he's chatting to me about his career in the ATO and what it's like and everything like that. So things like that. Then it says, but if he will not hear you, then take with you one or two more, that in the mouth of two or three witnesses, every word must be established. So now if they will not hear you, it says that you take with you witnesses. So the first witness is your brother, so to speak. So that is why the first one, if you notice, for example, that what a bank does with you, let's say that a bank is trying to get a credit card debt off you, or enforce it against you, or enforce a mortgage payment against you. Now, what actually happens there? The banks will send you letters. You've noticed, I don't know if any of you have ever been chased for debts by a bank, but that's what they do. They'll send you a 3-part legal notice. The first notice will be, hey, how are you, my beloved John? We just happen to notice you've fallen behind in your payments, you know? Is there a problem? Then please give us a call. Ring your friendly bank. We'd love to have a chat with you, you know, and we'll work out something with you. That's obeying the first ordinance. The next one they do is it will be a little bit like, you haven't actually paid up now, so you need to kind of get back to us with an arrangement. Otherwise, we may take enforcement action. Then they'll warn you and say, this is a final warning, and they'll give you a warning. And then after that, you'll get a notice of default and you're off to court. And they're actually following exactly what is written here, like to the letter. If they will not hear you in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, then if they still neglect to hear them, tell it to the church. And the church means go to the court. So that's effectively another way of the court, because the church was the legal judiciary system here of the people of Israel who Jesus was speaking to. So that's why that's exactly what the bank followed. And then if he doesn't listen to the court and doesn't pay, let him be as a heathen man or publican. In other words, then you get handed over, and the bailiff or the sheriff will come and start taking your assets, or you'll get jailed or whatever else. So this, my friends, or everyone who's listening, is the legal system in a nutshell. This is it. So I personally always try and knock it off now and then. I don't like getting to this part at all if I can avoid it, because that point of view now, you're in a difficult situation, a much more difficult one. So that is, and that, by the way, so the 2 or 3 witnesses. So in other words, so for example, the witnesses that we use or the banks use are letters. So each letter is a witness. So you might get 3 letters as a witness. So in the ancient times, or what it might be, let's just say, a good example is, let's just say you're part of a church right now and you got a problem with someone in the church. The best thing you can do is go to that person in the church and see if the 2 of you can resolve it. If you can't, you may go and get an elder of the church and someone else, bring them before the person and talk to them to get independent witnesses or a mediator. And then if they won't listen, then it might become a big major thing. So the letters are basically our witness. So this is Matthew chapter 18, okay? So these are like important principles of legal notice. The third thing I'm going to just throw in here for now, and then we're going to race off to the legal notices, but I'm just going to throw this in now, seeing as we're covering this, and I'll cover this another time. But if you read Ezra 7 and Matthew 17, this was the thing that turned my life around and made me realize that about taxes and how it all worked. The sons of God are free. And the son of God, you can read in this book, in the book of Romans and various others, is different from a son of the system or a slave. So you'll see that very clearly. The true sovereign son of God, or man, or daughter, or woman of God, so to speak, the true sovereign woman or sovereign man, they know who they are. They know they're created by God. They know that they do things like, I choose, for example, to drive a certain way on the roads. And a good way how I apply this, I drive in bus lanes all the time. If there's no buses, I just do it. As soon as I see a bus in the bus lane, I immediately pull out and don't go near it. Why? Because I respect the person who actually, I respect the reason for the rule of the bus lane is to enable public transport to move in an efficient, timely and orderly way to make sure that the system works smoothly and the buses aren't delayed. So if I see an ambulance come screeching up the road, I am as fast as I can out the way. I'm not doing that because I'm scared. I'm not getting up the bus lane because I'm scared. I'm getting up the bus lane because as a sovereign man, I respect the bosses. It's like, just for example, because I've got a black belt in martial arts doesn't mean I go around beating the shit out of people. If anything, I'll be doing everything I can to avoid a fight because I know I can really hurt someone. So it's sovereignty in its own right is a whole new way of living and being. You know, it really is. And I think a few of you would know what I meant, a whole new way of living and being. It doesn't mean you now have the legal tools to become a dick. It just means that you have the living tools to live your life with life, liberty and property freely and a peaceful, orderly and just life. That's basically what you're doing, but also understanding you have an equal responsibility to provide the same environment for your society and be a good, you know, a really responsible, helpful, contributing member of your community. So that's how I see it. So that's why I drive that way. You know, that's why I drive, you know, a little bit more better than I used to probably drive these days. And that's more by choice. When I'm dealing with policemen, for example, when I'm pulled over for a random breath test, I'm very friendly to them because I don't decide it because I actually like random breath tests. I think that I understand them. They're actually a protection because I've had drunk drivers almost wipe me out. And so making sure that's not going on, I'm perfectly happy with something like that. Having someone pull me up when I'm walking in fresh air on the beach and try to tell me to wear a mask is just absurd, you know, by contrast. So this is the foundations of law to understand, and understanding that these basic rules that I've given you here are the rules of the legal system as we know it. By 2 or 3, are you enjoying this so far? Like, just give me a bit of an idea if you're enjoying it, what you're feeling watching it. I want to make sure that I'm not losing people. If you think it's amazing, if you think it's absolute nonsense, you know, if you're like not really sure, if you're understanding the basics, okay, good. At least some people like it, which is good. Great. Well, I'm glad you like it, Katie. I was hoping you were getting it. You're someone I know. You do some great contributions in what you're doing. So, and you got one tomorrow night, which is great. So, yeah. So basically, just little clues, and these are the things to kind of consider, meditate, ponder. Public servant, not public master. See, this is, you got to reframe your mind. You know, you got to completely reframe your mind on this. It means if you get all this, you can be the dumbest, freedom person in this group and get the best result. My son, who's 17 years of old, is in a trading course, and everyone else in the group who's adults, and I think there's one other 20-year-old, he's making money already. And his attitude was, he said, I'd rather start trading, because all the others were told a paper trade and they're all doing it. He didn't do that. And he just told me, he said, look, he said, I'd rather lose money early on, because that's how I learn. I don't learn by doing it on paper, because paper doesn't mean anything, Dad. I'd rather learn by losing money. Now, I love that. But he said, I'll make sure that when I'm starting, I'm only putting small amounts, so I'm limiting my risk. And I thought, this guy's going to do well. He got it. He said, I'd rather lose money when I start, because he said, I don't want to get into a false idea of making money on paper. And I thought, fuck, this guy's taught me something, because I'd always believed, paper trade or whatever. And he's making money from pretty much after, I think, about a week when he was losing money, because he just worked out his system. So the point is, this is all about how you think above all else. And I could teach you the greatest stuff in the world, but if you don't get what I'm saying here, you're going to lose, and you will lose. And one of the reasons I stopped helping groups like this was I used to help groups like this, and I just, being honest, I just concluded that the bunch of people in the awakening movement were absolute idiots. That was my conclusion. They were more running around seeing it as an opportunity to let out their anger, and I thought, you better see a psychologist to do that, and so, and not really wanting to learn like the secrets of strategies. Yeah, and exactly, Katie, how you think about it, and learning to master the strategy behind this. But I know that that the government is a servant. So when I'm dealing with government officials, they're public servants. They've got jobs. They're doing what they're told. I'm a sovereign man running businesses and investing, doing groups like this. I'm a lot further advanced than them. So it's part of my job to, be kind to them and help them understand and learn properly their responsibilities as public officials and what they're supposed to be doing, and not basically working on behalf of some foreign guy who's coming in to try and take over and build a slave race. That's kind of how I'm seeing this. So the other one here in the Bible, which is really good, is so just weights and balances. This is why we've got a fraudulent money system where you got money printed by out of nothing. It's an absolute, it's not a fair monetary system. So it's all in the law of Moses. So these are the three key maxims of commercial law. Law cannot compel performance. A law is to be voluntary consented. Each law must have a remedy. He who leaves the field of battle first consents by default. Doing nothing is acceptance. So these are good laws, but every law must have a remedy. Now, so you know, I've got to go for, say, 25 more minutes till right on 9 o'clock. Take questions, and then I'm going to go through, and all I'm going to go through there is if anyone wants to, basically be part of, like I said, a course or some kind of common law course. What we're going to do is put together, get a list of people for expression of interest. And then sometime next week, we'll do a webinar to go through how it would work, because honestly, we've got to work it out. I've done ones before, but that's how we'll be doing it. So things like that. So anyway, so that's basically the ones of commercial law. Just sending a message to Edward right now, just so while I'm typing. Okay, let's just touch a bit on preparing a legal notice. So how do I do my notices? And like I said, I'm not giving legal advice. This is what I learned in the movement, and this is by and large the general principles of what you got to do, okay? Now, most people write very emotional letters. one rule of law, of legal principles, is don't say too much. Now, what I mean by that is stick to the facts. You know, don't kind of stick to the facts. So stick to the facts, don't say too much, less is more. That's a really important thing when it comes to drafting a legal notice. Less is more, not the other way around. So state the matter, state the facts or background. And by the way, I've used this over and over and over and over and over and over again myself. So now for those who have to leave early, I'm just going to quickly put this link up. This is the link you can jump on just to basically say you're interested. There's no obligation, by the way. There's no money you've got to put there or anything. It just lets us know. So when we send out the email or do the special webinar to let people know how it's going to work, how we're going to do a workshop, like group together, like where people can come and physically get together for, you know, a few days or whatever and hang out. Fill out that form, okay? Just click on that link, which I've put there, and fill out that form. Now, we'll give it again at the end, but I'm just giving it now because I appreciate that some people may not be able to stay till the end. So, yeah, I put it in the chat, so you've got to read the chat carefully. So, anyway, I've just got that up, and then I'm just going to go onto this now. So this is what it looks like, by the way, if you click on it, just so it's there. And I've just had people messaging me saying they can't stay for a lot longer. So just in case you do. So that's the link, by the way. Anyway, okay, so let me go back now to this and keep moving. So state the facts, state the matter, facts or background, further and better particulars. In other words, you've really got to spell this out. So a classic example, you know, on that or whatever else. So Natalie says not bringing up the form and a link for me. I'm not quite sure why it is, Natalie, because I just clicked on it and went straight onto the link on the thing. So further and better particulars, impose a time limit is another one as well. And I'll give you an example shortly, but imposing a time limit. So I'll just turn this off for the moment. But yeah, imposing a time limit. So impose a consequence is another one. Remedy sought, and then some language in how you do it. So interesting. Yeah, some it's working, some it's not. So maybe it's going to try later on for those who are not. So yeah, so basically, these are the principles of the kind of things you've got to take really seriously. So it shall be taken, imposing a consequence. Now, these are the kind of things that often get missed, and which I've done, especially with school bullying. Now, these kind of things like school bullying, especially with employers. Now, this is where I think I know some of you who've got bosses, aged care facilities, things like that. These are where learning these kind of things can be very useful. I mean, now in saying that, but the strategy is important too, because understand with an employer, if you go this path, it may backfire temporarily. And what that means is they may threaten you with your job. And if you're attached to your job and you're scared of losing your job and the financial security where that will leave you. So what I always do, you know, with something like that, is you really, you know, want to go ahead and make sure that you've also got strategy. You're planning what could happen in the worst case scenario or whatever else. So I always say, if you ever want to learn, have a look at what the banks do when they're chasing you for a credit card debt. If you can ever find that, or, you know, I've taken myself, I once went through a process where I just didn't pay my mortgage for 1.5 years just to see what happened. And, you know, they went through all the different things and I got hit with notices, and then I took them to the ombudsman and they, you know, because they were being dicks about it, and made them kind of, you know, go through rings. And finally, 18 months later, I got the position I had to pay. You know, so you'd be surprised how, when you know your rights, how you can make it really damn difficult for these places. And many employers don't like it. You know, but I follow this process strictly. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. So the best way to teach this is just by showing you some examples. So I had a situation where I had a friend or client who was disabled, and they had purchased some gym equipment, but the company didn't want to give it to her because she hadn't claimed it for a few months because she'd been really sick. And they kept saying that her time had expired and everything like that. And I rang them first and foremost. So I followed the 2 or 3 witnesses process, and I followed the Matthew 18 system. So first I rang the company and I said to them, I would just really like to basically, sort this whole thing out, it really shouldn't be an issue. I've seen the invoice, I've seen the payment. Can we just get her gym equipment sent to us? And the guy just said to me, kind of gave me some reason and tried to stall me and started going off at me and saying, it's been this company policy and we've got to go back through this and, we may put it to a case review. And I just said to him, look, I said, I don't quite know if you get what I'm talking to you about here, but I said, the question is not whether my client will get the gym equipment. I said, it's how much pain you'll experience for her to get this. And he said, huh? And it was quite funny. I just said, basically, I said, you will be getting a legal notice next. And I said, if necessary, I said, no problem. I said, I'm sure Fair Trading and these various companies will be very interested to hear, and the media, about the fact that you're not basically, giving equipment to a disabled person. I said, I think that's not going to go down too well. So I said, you will experience pain if you go this path with me. It's just a question of how much. So the question is now yours to consider. And within 24 hours, the equipment landed up miraculously on his doorstep. So that was an example where just simply ringing up sorted the whole thing out pretty quickly. Another example, which was not quite so straightforward, was when Bedshed, and Grace would remember this was years ago, it was some bed company, and it wasn't Bedshed, it was some company. We ordered a bed for Josiah, or one of the kids, and because we had given away our other bed to someone else, we were going to give it away on that day. Grace was very insistent and said, look, I really need this bed by this time. And the guy said, yeah, there's no problem, it'll all happen. And went over and over it with the manager, and the manager was sure it would happen. Sure enough, on the day, it didn't happen. And Grace was like ringing them up and basically saying to her that she was a liar and that they never would have promised her that, and they gave no assurances of time. And they were being absolutely horrendous. So I rang them and they were horrendous to me back. Like terrible. We tried to ring them up and sort it, and they were just basically horrendous. And said, so I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, we want a refund. So they wouldn't give it. So I hit them with a legal notice. I just followed this out. I was very factual. I stated the matter, stated the facts backgrounds. I put the third and better particulars, but on this date, not this time. I also mentioned at this time that there was a witness, because there was, Grace had a witness who was with her at the time of the call, who's willing to swear an affidavit, of her meeting. You basically have, 72 hours from this moment of this legal notice to provide us with a, with a full and complete refund into our bank account. I said, when the remedy sought, I said, was basically, so 72 hours was the time limit, or in that particular time, or the remedy sought was the return of the money. In that case, we didn't want the bed, we'd moved on somewhere else. And the consequence, I said, failure to do so, and it shall be taken, if you fail to respond within the allotted time frame, it shall be taken, that you have that you've consented to the above facts as being correct, and that failure to deliver the said refund shall render you liable to compensatory damages in a court of competent jurisdiction. Now, of course, we served the legal notice by that time on facts, because this was like 14 years ago, and I think we got a call within a record period of time. The phone rang and they're like, the lady's freaking out, like, what is this letter? Like, what's this all about? We're like, well, you know, you didn't listen, no, your team didn't listen to us. So I said, that's our legal notice. And I'll say, we're planning to, you know, impose this on fair trading. And we're going to, you know, do this. And we kept going. And in the end, the girl actually started crying and saying, why are you guys being so horrible? We said, and we were like, well, we didn't get what we're looking for. And we got it back really quickly. The refund came back. And then what happened? No, sorry. Then they emailed us back or wrote to us about 24 hours later and said they decided to give us the refund, but they wrote these horrible things to try and save face. And then we served them another legal notice warning them of defamation. And they were beside themselves by that point in time. They just wanted to get rid of us. So I did this also with a church leader who years ago, who I got on quite well with, by the way. I quite liked the guy. I was involved in his church. This is going back a long time ago. The leader, this is just giving you examples of how you can use this. And what happened was in churches, and some of you may or may not know, they can be horrible places for gossiping and stupid accusations. And in that case, I was dating a girl at the time and I was having some problems with the relationship. And this girl was kind of a bit, you know, had a bit of, you know, a few screws going on or whatever else. And she went up the front for prayer in a particular meeting and was talking for a long time to one of the church leaders. And the church leader kept staring at me every now and again when they'd look at me, and I was kind of going, okay, don't know what's going on over there, but not my business. And then about later on, because I was meant to be getting involved in a particular program with the church to do some music stuff or whatever else. And basically what happened was the church said, was when I contacted the leader and said, look, I'm just trying to find out what's going on here. And I left a message on his phone and he still hadn't returned my call after an hour. And then I get this email, and the email starts saying to me, you know, hi, Warren, you know, the reason I got back to you, sorry I haven't, it's come to our attention some very disturbing allegations against you. You know, it appears that there's some moral improprieties. He gave some list of stuff. Now, I lost my shit. I really did. And I just got out my legal notice checklist, and I just thought, I'm going to write this motherfucker the worst legal notice he's ever going to see in his life. Because, I mean, churches do this stuff all the time. I thought, I want to teach you a lesson, my friend. And so I just, you know, got my legal notice, and all I did was I wrote it on him. I was very matter of fact, very methodical, and I just went through, stated all the facts, and I said, clearly this is based on hearsay evidence or whatever that you got on from this girl. I said, you're under immediate orders to cease and desist. That's another very useful little word. With any allegations, any statements, and failures to do so, and it shall be taken, you know, you agree, you know, that you can be rendered liable, you know, to basically compensatory damages and basically defamation. So I pretty much said you're ordered to immediately compel your church leaders to, you know, basically not do this stuff, and order your church leaders that they are not in any way whatsoever to speak anything of these allegations to anyone, to not, you know, damage my good name or my reputation. Now, he just absolutely shat himself. Like, he literally did. He rang me like, you know, I'm sure you'd like that one, Cameron, being in a church. But yeah, he literally shat himself, and he was going like, look, I can assure you I have not spoken to anyone. And I believed him, by the way, on that one. He said, you know, I'm really sorry. I really didn't mean to, you know, please forgive me, you know. And we sorted it out, no problem. I said, look, I didn't want to send you that silly notice. I said, I like you. And I said, but it was a stupid email to send me just because that silly woman goes and tells one of your pastors that shit. I mean, I said, seriously? And he goes, look, I know. He goes, I'm really sorry. I said, look, I said, I like you. And I said, let's just move on. Fortunately, I think he was nervous of me after that because he didn't really kind of, you know, chat to me as much as he used to anymore. So we use this in school as well with school bullying. Schools hate the words duty of care. Now, that's one rule that they go, oh, shit, because that means, and that is why I think with this mask, I personally, if my kids were in school, I'd be having some fun on that one. I mean, actually masking up kids is just like absolutely, you know, nonsense, you know. So, yeah, so what there are is there's a series of different languages you can use, which I've got here. So, which I've just put together a series, of languages or whatever. Let me just put them up here now. So yeah, these are the languages here. So these are some of the words. So one of the rules I learned with law is stick to the facts, don't say too much, less is more. I find people who are new to this kind of stuff normally say a lot of shit. They just do. They kind of think that by doing it, it'll show you they're empowered. Normally it just shows you a bit of a dick, is what it actually shows, that you don't know what you're doing. And you kind of like the IT person who taught yourself from Google how to be a computer expert and then are trying to convince people that you are. So the one time I got myself into a lot of trouble with the Legal Practice Board I mentioned, or when that went for 3 years, it was because it was the only time I broke that rule. I actually thought the Legal Practice Board were being fair with me, so I wrote them a really nice letter. Now, call me dumb, and I deserve it if you do, but I did. And my barrister who helped me honestly said, that stupid letter. He goes, I wish you hadn't written that stupid letter. He goes, surely you knew better than that. And I said, look, I know. And he goes, you're an absolute idiot writing that letter. I said, I know. I said, you can beat me up afterwards, but let's just sort it out for now. And the fact was, he said, if you hadn't written that letter, it would have been over with in 2 weeks. And that's what I find that most people do, is they say too much. A prosecutor from the ASIC told me, and my sister, by the way, is one of Perth's top criminal lawyers. She's often been in the news, Linda Black. You may or may not have seen her. But Linda, she always would tell me the same. She goes, just shut your mouth. She said, you just don't say shit, That was what she told me when I was involved in an investigation even 3 years ago. She helped me out in. Everyone was going in there, getting hours and getting absolutely hammered, coming out traumatized. I walked out an hour later, they were apologizing to me and talked about cryptocurrencies for half an hour afterwards, because I just didn't say anything. So you just stick to the facts. And the biggest thing is you don't lie to government officials. That's another thing too. Someone's written about a school masking issue right now. My 15-year-old is refusing to go to school. Well, I don't blame him. I wouldn't be going either. I would just kind of say, well, Grace and I were laughing about it. I said to Grace, God, I said, I'm kind of, it intrigues me how parents get worked up about this one. And because she goes, yeah, I would just tell them don't go. Or I actually said to my kids the other day, I said, I really wish you guys were still in school. And they said, why? And I said, because I said, honestly, I said, I know you guys would be too nervous to do this, so I'd drive you. I said, I'd give you a couple of $100 and I'd say to you, if you can do this and I can film it or someone can film it. I just said, I just want to laugh. So I said, I would get you to go into school, not wearing your mask, just walk straight into class if nothing happened. And when the teacher sort of says you have to wear one, you just kindly just say, well, look, I don't really like being muzzled like a sheep, and it means I can't breathe properly and I get scared and I've got to sit in this classroom all day and I want to learn, and have a serious face on it. And then when they're like, well, no, you have to wear one, say, well, I'm not going to wear one because, and then you quote the exemption, but say, look, I'm happy to leave the class and go and play in the park. I bought my football just in case you kick me out. Now, that's how I'd handle it. So people handle it different ways, but I would just be an absolute dick. That's how I would do it. I just tell them, just turn up to school and be a dick. I said, really, I think I'm not the best person on, well, no, I do know a lot about school, but I think by and large schools are stupid places. Robert Kiyosaki, in his book about school, basically says that schools, when you study the system, were originally set up in Prussia to make soldiers or slaves. So by and large, schools are to create slaves and to teach kids to, by and large, go and get a job. That's all you do. I mean, most of the richest men in the world failed in school. And that's because school just teaches you to get a job and work for people who are dumb. That's what I think it was Larry Ellison or Dell once said, that basically the smart people from school end up working for the dumb people who dropped out, because the dumb people, end up having to go and start their own companies or try something different. So I personally think that kids are the easiest on this mask thing. I really do. I just don't think it's a big issue myself, because you just really let them make their own choice. So the first thing I would encourage any parent on that is, is just let your kids make their own choice. I think it's an easy one. I think there's harder ones like your jobs, like aged care. I think they're far more difficult ones, whereas I reckon with a school, they're generally relatively straightforward, because you just say to your kids, look, don't wear one, seriously, don't wear one. If you don't want to, if you want to wear one, go for your life. If you don't want to wear one, then don't. And encourage your kids, because when they're young, they will listen to you as parents, and you can lead them by example, and don't think, oh no, that means if they don't go to school, they won't learn this stuff. Well, I mean, can any of you honestly, with good conscience, look at me in the face right now and tell me that you remember much about what you learned in school? No, you didn't. I mean, all you need to learn from school is how to read, how to write, and basically how to do a bit of maths. That's about it. And that's it. Everything else is kind of like you just pick it up as you go along. You can learn it on YouTube. That's just how the world is now. I mean, my son learned music on that. So, my son's learned about jabs, all that kind of stuff. So these are some of the tips of what you got to do. This is one little tip. When you're writing, generally, you shouldn't use passive language, but in legal notices, you should. So an example, what I mean by passive language is it shall be taken, for example, rather than I will take this or something else. So you go out of the personal. So it shall be taken. Cease and desist, that was the one I used on that particular, past or whatever else. If I was going to do it in the school, I would do that. And as a parent, this is something else you can do if you want to give us a shot. And this is not advice, but this is just stuff you can do. You can go on, for example, and like I said, I could go through all day at stuff, and I'm just going to give you an example. So, like, you would just state the matter, you'd state the facts or background, you'd state the legislation, you'd state the mandate, you'd state the rights, you'd state the exemption. There's definitely one around mental health, stress and trauma. You would pull that one out. If your child has ever been to a psychologist or been to someone about asthma or been someone with stress and you've got genuine legal stuff, you can mention that. But otherwise, you would just go and mention the stuff. You'd simply say that, any attempt to impose, a mask upon him, it shall be taken. But you agree to be, that if there's any, that basically, your concerns about his ability to breathe or whatever else, and say, any like mental health or any other stuff from doing it, it shall be taken. You agree, to breach your duty of care, and you agree to be liable for full and compensatory damages for what you're doing, for basically forcing this and using duress without making any viable attempt to, ascertain a reasonable exemption and help my child function in a fair, undiscriminated way within your school. That's the kind of stuff I'd be doing. So you can do this with the banks. The main thing is to do this. And this is the kind of stuff, like I said, I'll definitely go through with you if we're going to do a course. So, yeah, conditional agreements, exactly. He just struggles being around us kids. I don't blame him. I really don't, I would be the same. I would have the same blooming problem. I really would, I think it's, I would be the same. I would have a real problem with it because, so yeah, someone says my audio is breaking up. Is that the case still? No, not here. Great. Okay. So yeah, this is the simple version of the legal notice, and we're finishing this up here now. The main thing I wanted to do was to give you a bit of an idea. So the main thing to do is this little map here can help you get started. The matter, like, is school bullying, or being forced to wear a mask in school, or your child is being bullied in school. Bullying, by the way, is the easiest to use this for. If your child is being bullied at school, that is the easiest walk in a park to stop the bullying in 2 seconds. If they won't listen to you, you follow the Matthew 18 process, you go into the school, you have a chat with the headmaster very kindly. If they kind of give you a very vague thing, have the legal notice ready in your hand just in case they won't address it, and you pull it out and serve it on them, just give it to them. And say, and then you would call in the receptionist or someone there and you'd serve it so they can see it. And it would state the matter about the bullying. It would state the full facts, what's happened, the instance of the bullying, which are the particulars. A time limit to sort it, generally 24 hours. The consequence, if they don't, it shall be taken that they breach their duty of care as a school to actually do that. Where do you find the letter template? Someone's asking, there's no letter template. I'm giving you this idea here. And yes, this is why I said, really, there's only so much I can do on the time we've got. And that's why I'm keen to do a legal rights common law course for anyone who's interested. So that's why I've given you, write your name and register your interest. So the impose a consequence, the remedy sought, which is to cease the bullying and have it complete and finished. So in terms of education as an alienable right, I think parents need to realise, about myself, that there's so much education available online now for kids. Like there's Khan Academy, there's various online teachings, much better than they'll get in school. Cam Roberts, who's here, would know what I mean. Like my son Edward, who works with Cam, he's 17. I think Cam would agree he's getting a better education with Cam and me than he ever get in school. We're actually starting a youth school ourselves. We've had one going for quite a while, teaching youth to be sovereign. But Grace and I are about to actually launch something that's going to actually run a novice kind of teaching and actually run a youth kind of school for kids from 9 through to about 17. And I've already got, in fact, all the interested parties are between 9 and 10 at the moment. So yeah, Grace and I are very excited about that. I love teaching kids this stuff because kids just get this really quickly, like really quickly. Adults kind of sit there going, oh, I don't know if I should do that, and and get scared. Well, kids just listen and go, okay, and they just generally do it. So yeah, so basically we've got various rights that we cover. So I'll just finish off before we take questions and then finish off. The masking, which is a big one here. That's an example of the Emergency Management Act and what it actually says when I had a read of it. Yeah, look, basically put your name on that common law interest group, Sarah, and everyone else, because what we'll do is also email people on the homeschooling with that, because we're going to do a special webinar for kids for all of you on the schooling, which is going to be separate to this one. So just make sure you just fill out that form. Yeah, I'm so excited how many people are saying you're interested in this, because I would like to see the most empowered kids in West Australia you could just about get ever and anywhere else. And, let's get the kids empowered, I personally think kids can lead the way out of this nonsense because they'll stand up to the government, whereas I think adults are too scared, whereas I think kids will. The Healthy WA website goes a bit further and it just says you may wish to ask. So nowhere that it says, by the way, but you have to have a medical certificate, and I'm presuming that's to do with the Privacy Act and the human and things like that about medical. I personally don't have any problem telling what my condition is myself. Some people have a problem. I don't have a problem with it myself. So I'm happy to tell them what the situation is, because all they have to do is go to hospital records and they'll find it anyway. Queensland Health directives have the exact same wording for the exemption, but it adds the following words as explanatory comment. So persons who have obstructed breathing, serious skin condition, intellectual disability, mental health illness, or have experienced trauma. So that's pretty broad, I think, myself. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff I've got on my phone ready to go if I need it. So it's always the secret is to read the statutes carefully and the mandates. This is where people go wrong. You just read it very, very carefully. So that's why I was saying when I read that language there. So it's deliberately vague. So physical illness, mental illness, condition or disability, which makes the wearing of it unsuitable. It's pretty damn broad. And it says you may wish to ask your registered health practitioner or disability care provider. So if I was, for example, having a cop, after me and I didn't have a medical certificate, I just would be saying, look, I'm happy to go and see if I can find, but you got to understand, the way I read the legislation and the way I read the mandate, nowhere does it say it. And I would be showing them that and saying, so you can't, it's not really fair to say that I'm going to be fined when it clearly says this. You clearly got the human rights or saying this and the Privacy Act saying this. So I think it's fairly safe for me to assume, and law can't be about assumption because the burden of proof is on the one seeking to enforce the law. That's how I'd be saying it as I understand it. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or be belligerent, but that's how I get this. So I'd be saying, look, I really don't understand or get what's going on here. This is my situation, or this is what it says here. I'm happy to go and see a doctor about the whole situation, But mind you, how can I go to see a doctor right now about the situation where at the time, back a month or two ago, or whenever it was, or a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, it has happened, to go and say, oh, at that time you had this going on. I mean, obviously, that's not easy for me to do right now. My sister, who's a criminal lawyer, I know, for example, she's very good at this kind of stuff, and she generally gets her people off nearly all the time. So these are the kind of things you're saying. So it's understanding too, the other thing about the state of emergency, which I think some of you know, it's a problem because that suspends constitutional rights. And so this is why, this is why for now, when I said about the art of war, the small battles for the long run, I'm just learning to be number one, realize first and foremost, I'm sovereign and way above all this anyway, so it doesn't bother me. But when I am functioning and working with the system, I'm working within the laws of what we've got. And the unfortunate reality that we have a state of emergency, which even though it's based on a fraudulent, basis, in my opinion, on this whole scamdemic, nevertheless, right now it's what we've got to deal with. And that's why working within those frameworks and those mandates, the main thing I want you to see is those mandates are so effing vague. They always are. And that's because they give you a remedy and a way out. They actually do give you a way out. That's how you got to see it. There's always a way out. And Ali said, I don't understand why the people are getting away with arresting young people with asthma and puts his knee into her back. I don't actually know that situation. I mean, there's one common reason I find, I'm not saying it was the reason that situation, is when people refuse to give their name and address. And the problem is, I saw on the Facebook group, a retired copper had put a post up there, which was a very well-written post. And I thought, thank God, this is a really sane response. He said, don't ever refuse to give your name and address. Don't do that, because you are operating, unfortunately, in a legal system and society and under an emergency. So sometimes I find that happens, people just don't give their name and address. That's number one. Another one is when they start claiming they're a sovereign citizen. That's another one as well. So, I just basically give it. I don't have any problem. I said, yeah, look, my name's Warren. I live here. I mean, if I was pulled over, I'd have no trouble giving him my details whatsoever. And basically been calmly walking through the mandate with them. That's how I've had tremendous success with stuff, how I dealt with like major tax audits. I had a few of them. I had, ASIC investigations, legal practice boards, and had unusually good success. And it was because I learnt the strategy. And being belligerent with a cop is just a no-win battle. I mean, you might have some fun doing it, but there's a reasonable chance that if you get them on a bad day, they're going to, arrest you. So that's probably, I don't know the full story, but you've just got to be very calmly, awake to your rights, and awake to how the law works, and read the mandates for yourself really, really, really careful. So Christina said, a friend of mine didn't want to give her name and address, end up in court, and she still wouldn't, and they put her in a mental institute. Well, yeah, I think that's what's probably going to happen. It's, so I don't see the point of being belligerent. You might win it. You're not going to win the war. It's about winning the long-term war. The bullying, fines, all this kind of stuff. You just got to read it. Now, Jason asked a question about tax. So, and I'll answer that, Jason. Someone asked, why do some people say mandates aren't law? I don't know, but I personally think they don't know what they're talking about. That's my opinion, and I am very welcome to be proved wrong on that one. I'd be extremely happy if I was proved wrong on that one. I've gone over and over this stuff with Blackstone's commentary, martial law, and my conclusion is pretty simple. I think that there is a state of emergency. It's valid, but on a flawed basis, which means I think it's arguable that the whole virus thing is just an absolute load of nonsense. It doesn't mean remotely a genuine pandemic. It really doesn't when you actually look at it. So that's how I take that. So you're dealing with that. I can tell you now, I went through the legislation. I don't have any doubt still to this day that the speeding fine laws in WA are not legal either. And there's various reasons to do with ultra vires doctrine, ancient laws. I went through everything. The way they were drafted, I don't have any doubt, but they're speeding fine laws. Technically, they don't have the power to draft them. And I took that to court, tried to argue it, and they kind of just threw it out pretty quickly. But, you know, as I assume they probably would. So in terms of, yeah, thanks, Cam. That's good. So on the tax issue, so generally when it comes to taxation issue, what which Jason's asked about, and about tax debt and what you do about that stuff and the ATO chasing you, the ATO are quite a hard one to deal with. I always recommend people should be set up in companies or trust or structure of some kind when it comes to their businesses or anything. The basic principles of own nothing, control everything, there's a good reason for that. And I'll show you something with this that's quite powerful. And I'll show you this. Let's just say, for example, and I'll just put this up here, taxes. So let's just say that, I'll just do this here. So let's just say that you have a company. So scenario one, we'll call this. Scenario one. You have a company, and then we'll just do here, scenario two. So you have a company set up or trust, and it basically owes, let's say it owes $250K to the ATO in company tax, GST, and pay as you go in the BAS, okay? And it just can't pay it. Now, how does this actually, you know, work or whatever else? Now, if you can't pay that debt, there's various ways you can do them. One is to pay it off and, you know, pay it off in a payment plan, things like that. But there's one thing you can do with a company, but you can't do in the second situation. So let's say you owe $300K in your own name. And I'll just go to that one in a minute. But so in this situation, you can liquidate the company, provided you meet certain criteria, and kill off the tax debt 100% legally and move on. You can do that very easily in most situations, and we used to help a lot of clients about this situation. Scenario two, you just basically can't be fucked setting up a structure, and you just do it all in your own name. In this situation here, you must pay it, and the only way out of it, and to avoid it, you have to either, one, prove it was wrong, and that's very hard. The burden of proof is on you, not the ATO, but it's really hard. Number two is to, you know, claim you're sovereign, and good luck with that one. Three, declare bankruptcy or do an insolvency. That's your choices. So it's very difficult to do that. So generally I don't actually help people who've got a personal tax debt problem with the ATO like that, because it's very hard to do much about it. I do have a friend who does some help for people with that. What he does is he ends up doing insolvency arrangements on the debt, but in a way where it's not going to send you bankrupt. That's what he's done very successfully. So, because yes, it's very difficult on that sort of stuff with the ATO. Now, obviously, there's some who say the ATO can't tax you legally individually. Again, that one I actually think is correct. When I went through and checked the law out carefully with a lawyer friend of mine, my view is that is actually correct. It is actually voluntary. In saying that, good luck arguing that with the ATO. Good luck. I have had many of my friends in common law, supposedly awake movements, do that. I've fallen out with some of them because I just said to them, there's better ways to do this, and they've gone and they've all lost, you know, handsomely, and end up having all kinds of problems and stress, if nothing else. So I've only ever met one guy who, using that argument, I've met three guys who successfully have done that in their life, where they've simply argued that the tax office has got no it's voluntary and there's no requirement to pay tax or anything like that. So there's 1, 2, 3. Let me see, how many is this? There's Nick, there's Alan, and there's Daniel. Yeah, so the first guy I know, a guy called Nick, did it over in, had an incredible win. And I actually met him at a seminar because he was quite famous in the underground movement, his cases. And I actually met him and we were chatting and I was kind of like so excited to meet him. He said to me, honestly, he said, it's just so stressful. He said, you know, I won all my cases, but they still kept giving me shit in the background. And in the end, I just asked them, look, you know, they ended up saying to me, look, you know, we made a deal. They said, and he ended up said, I ended up paying them a small amount of tax. They said like 20 grand when he owed them $1 million. They said, look, you pay us 20 grand and help us save some face. And he did that and he got back in the system. And he said that was his choice. So that's the first guy I met. Second guy who did it very successfully, though, he's lived off the grid for years and he lives in a barter system mainly and cash only. And the third guy who did it, he helped 200 clients do it successfully. And then by the 200th client, he ended up being visited by a few people and he fled the country. So that's a path. You've got to be pretty brave and pretty certain if you're going to go down that path to get up and say the HO is, you know, illegal and it's voluntary, even though you're actually correct. So there's other ways to do it. Like I said, I've chosen myself, knowing what I know with taxes. In 2016, Peter Martin, journalist, Sydney Morning Herald, wrote an article, the 56 richest people in Australia, only 2 of them paid tax. They paid on average of 1.7 million, the tax advisors, but by and large, they know tax is by and large pretty optional. So there's plenty of ways to legally minimize tax. You've just got to actually know how the system works, that's all. So that's one way you can do it, is just to simply go and legally set yourself up to make sure that you really do basically, pay the tax or whatever else. So, but you legally set yourself up. So that's my opinion for what it's worth. I think that I understand that people, can see possibilities and get excited when they hear all this kind of stuff. But my big but of this really is to say you just got to make sure if you do that, like Buddha is saying, being unattached. And I've just said to people, look, if you're really serious about going that path, how serious are you willing to fight that? Are you willing to go to court? I remember having someone, argued with me, and saying, well, this is what my, private foundation advisors told me and my common law guys. I said, look, so do you think any of them will stand by if you go to court? And they thought about it and said, probably not. I said, okay. I said, are you ready? Do you believe in this enough that you're going to be willing to be a martyr for the cause if you have to, and stand your ground and fight for what you believe is right? And they said, no, I don't really want to go through stress for my family. I just want to be tax-free. I'm like, yeah. So I'm saying, I understand. So I'm saying, but it's my duty to tell you, seeing as you're seeing me for advice, there's a chance this could happen to you. And I gave them a few cases. So I said, if you're up for that, then keep going this path. If you're not up for that, try another way. And virtually all of them in the end said, yeah, look, it's actually not what my private foundation people tell me. I said, well, then go see your private foundation people. I said, don't see me, and make sure they're willing to stand by you. And sure enough, within a few days, they contacted me saying, yeah, no, they're refusing to stand by me and saying, I've just got to believe it for myself. So I said, exactly. So that's a long answer, winded answer about taxes. So that's the link again for everyone. So anyone else got any questions? I've been fired with them. So just if you put them, you haven't answered them, just chuck them in here. Does biosecurity overrule state laws? I think so, but I'm not sure. I think Serena might know that one. I've heard that it does, and I'm presuming it does, but the Commonwealth state relationship's so complicated, I just don't really know. That's my honest answer. So someone's put here that it does. Some states are requiring COVID tests as an entrance requirement. How can we kindly refuse? I would be reading the requirements of the mandate. That's what I would be doing. That's how I'd handle it. because the chances are there's going to be a remedy. There is a guy in Perth I've heard who got out of them. He found a way out of them, but I haven't had a chance to talk to him. A guy called Nigel March, and I do know, I've met Nigel before, and he's a pretty switched on guy. So if you can come across Nigel March anywhere, I know he's pretty smart guy. Chris, you talked about deregistering as a voter and coming off the census. How do you do this? What does it mean? I don't know. I just stopped doing it. I just, and then I read the Voting Act at the time and looked to see what the remedy was. And the remedy was, it says if you had a particular religious objection, I don't know if it's still there. And I just wrote and said I had a religious objection to voting because my spiritual beliefs told me that politicians and the political system didn't work in its current form. And so they just waived my fine and never heard from them again. In terms of the census, I just used some ancient arguments that can take a long time to explain. There's a whole webinar itself just to understand that. Christine, Nigel and Kim March on Perth Patriots and Telegram. Yeah, no, they're pretty switched on, Nigel and Kim. So yeah, look, I'm pretty sure Nigel was the guy I heard who got around it. So if you can get in contact with him, he may be the right person because I think they've found some pretty good stuff from what I've been told. What about debts to the banks in a trust? I'm not sure what you mean. What do you mean family trust? But generally debts to banks are very hard to deal with. That's a whole different kind of way of going about it. Would you advise to buy residential property land by a trust? Wouldn't really advise on this webinar right now about knowing your personal situation. And there's a lot of problems with buying residential property in a trust to do with land tax and things like that. So the short answer is you can do it, but I mean, I've done it myself in the past, but you've got to really know what you're doing to get around the land tax, capital gains tax problems that can cause. You talked about deregistering as a voter. Oh, yep, no, I've answered that one. I previously put Governor Natalie on notice for vaccination lockdown using solutions empowerment document. I feel they had too much in them. Yeah, I'm not sure what they are. With regards to him stopping my childcare subsidy due to non-completion of vaccination schedule, can I still use his notices? Also, my children's father's estate, would it work to avoid having to complete a G2G pass? I don't know. I've never had to apply for a G2G pass. I would probably just apply for one myself if it was me. I think that's, if I'm honest, I think there's probably other people within this movement who would know ways around that. And I would just be reading what the requirements are and seeing if there's a way to do that myself or if there's an exemption. And like I said, there's normally a remedy somewhere. But yeah, I wouldn't be, if I had to leave and get a pass, I would just do it myself. It doesn't really bother me. So in terms of have I moved around freely, honestly, I could see the writing on the wall because I've had a few psychic visions as well. Now there's less people here. I'll be more open about it. But I had a situation in 2018 where I had one of those life-changing moments you just don't ever forget, where I had let's just say I saw higher experiences and higher energies and was shown stuff. And I was telling my family in 2018 there was going to be lockdowns at the airport, and I saw fires and bushfires, and I saw all kinds of government nutty jobs. I saw a big vaccination push breaking out in experiments, and I was talking about it. And I saw microchipping, been trying to bring microchips, and I saw these big military towers without knowing much about 5G, firing rays at people who'd been, jabs and killing them. That's the kind of shit I was seeing. And I saw this over many days. No, I was showed it clearly. And I had no idea what to do because I told all my family and I told some of my friends and others what was going on. And honestly, that was a horrible, 2019 was an awful year because I had seen all that and I thought, what on earth was that all about? And then, of course, this all happened. So I made a decision as soon as I saw the first sign. I haven't gone near a plane since last year because the only plane trip I've chosen to do was I flew to Broome back from Broome last year before they decided to muzzle up. But by and large, when I've just been traveling around WA for now. And avoiding travel for the time being until I see where things get to next and what goes on. I've decided myself, if I do go on a plane again, I won't be masking and I won't be, getting jabbed. I'll be getting special treatment, and I don't have any doubt there'll be a remedy myself. So I'm just waiting to see once Qantas open it up again and what they say, and then what the remedy will be. But there will be a remedy. So that's the thing to always remember. In the meantime, I've got the time of my life, and I'm going to, go out traveling, and I've been going all regional, going into forests and having an absolute blast. So, that's how I've been dealing with it. Christine flew Masters to Brisbane, yeah. There's various ways. And like I said, that's why I'm keen to do a common law or do a notice training course and do a workshop, because this is a kind of thing, like I said, one webinar will not teach you anything, really. Or no, it will teach you the foundation. That's why today, the one thing that if you just got one thing out of today, it's the way you think about this. That's the most critical thing you got to get nailed. Because if you can get that nailed, you kind of can work through it. It's actually pretty easy once you've actually nailed the way you think. If you haven't got the way you think correct, you can do all you want to do. You can be the greatest, most knowledgeable person in this group, and you'll get your ass kicked. That's my experience. So, yeah, anyway, I'm just seeing if there's any other questions here. You can't boil the ocean. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, offshore structure for cryptos. Yeah, look, that's the yeah, so in terms of that, so just in finishing off, I'll just quickly next steps or whatever. What we're doing is, like I said, we're looking at doing this common law course. So most of you put the name down on this, or how many of you need that link still again? Just so you can put, like I said, there's no, this is no obligation. It's just so we actually know. For those of you who would like to inquire more on the financial stuff, you click on this thing here. That's for those. I know a few of you have been firing questions about properties and about cryptos and about offshore structures and foundations. I've been getting quite a few of those, flying through. Those ones, go to that site here. So for the common law course, interest, and none of these, by the way, require you to pay. These are just, expression of interest in the course. Then I can email you about the homeschool stuff, or keep in contact on that one, as well as on the group. That's on the financial stuff. So awesome. Well, look, thank you, everyone. So who got at least some value out of this, or at least the two main things, like I said, is the mindset. The other one is the legal notice format. That's the other thing I'd like you to take away from that. But it's very powerful, that little legal notice format and that language. I use that thing in everything still to this day. If I was going to put a notice on a school, on different things, that's exactly how I do that. And like I said, if you get the chance to have a read of any bank documents which you've ever seen of a credit card company, trying to go after you, or debt collection, you will actually notice that three witnesses thing, which I showed you. You'll see it in everything that happens in society. We still follow the law of Moses to this day in the way it works. It's quite amazing. Even the way foundations are set up is exactly the book of Ezra and the book of Matthew in the way the foundations tax law does. In terms of the recording, it's going to be on the Global Wealth Club for, say, YouTube. We've got a YouTube Global Wealth Club channel. So just go on there, and we're going to make sure it's going to be plonked up there. So, yeah, and if you want to know a Bible, by the way, for those of you who've been asking me about a Bible, the King James Version Bible is the best one. I personally have my own one at home, which I bought. That's quite old. It's a really good one. But you can go, I use this one, Bible Gateway, I use quite heavily. So I like this one here. This is a fairly good King James Bible for an online one. So the King James. The reason I use the King James only myself is I researched every book about the different Bibles and what's been tampered with and how it's been fiddled around with and what's been left out. And the King James is the only one I've found that the really critical, activations and stuff haven't been tampered with. Whereas in all the other Bibles, the really critical stuff that reveal, for example, the earth before this earth, that reveal, you know, Atlantis and all that, were all kind of changed around and shifted. Whereas all of it's clearly, when you actually read the King James, you can actually find all that. It's all in there. So, yeah, and you swear in your Bible for your affidavits. Exactly, yes, and that's correct. Why? Because that is the basis of the law. The English law is based on the Holy Bible. The Magna Carta, if you read it, it's based on Almighty God, on the Holy Bible. The Bill of Rights, the Holy Bible. The Constitution, the Holy Bible. Until 30 years ago, they still used to have prayer in schools. You know, it's for this reason. So, great, everyone. Well, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you next time. So you'll be hearing from me over the next little bit. Thanks, everyone.